Good evening, Mags, and welcome to another very special episode of NUSS About That, the show that refuses to take itself too seriously, and although Match of the Day still ain't answering our calls, Sky Sports did. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I'm joined by Marcus Wood,
I'll read.
Wayne Murphy,
Hello.
Greg Wood,
Hi guys.
and our next guest certainly needs no introduction, right? Ladies and gentlemen, Keith Downie.
Hi guys, thanks very much for having me. It's nice to speak to some Scottish voices, and I'm sure by the end of this, my little Geordie twang might have disappeared.
Super. Thanks so much again for joining us tonight, Keith. Lads, how are we feeling about the show tonight, Marcus?
Yeah, absolutely buzzing. Can't wait to get into it.
Fine.
Honestly, super excited. I feel like I've watched Keith's career almost grow as I've been glued to Sky Sports for the last decade and so on. So really excited to be on it with Keith.
I'm Greg.
Yeah, same with Blaine. Been watching Keith on Sky Sports transfer deadline days. Brilliant. Well, I've been watching it. Tonight's going to be a good evening.
Well, listen, guys, I'm glad someone's still watching the channel.
And you are the face of the North East reporting, right, Keith? So not just Newcastle, you are involved in other stuff. But let's just kind of cut straight off into it tonight. We are hoping to gain some insight on you, your background, and a bit of the lowdown on the tune as well. So could you just kick us off and tell us how a boy from Scotland became a Sky Sports reporter?
Yeah, do you know, it's actually it's a bit of a strange story because I came down for a job interview in the Newcastle Chronicle. For the life of me, I can't remember what year it was. I think I must have been just out of uni, so I must have been in my early 20s. And I came down, and I remember walking along the quayside, going, "Oh, I like this place." And I've been down for a couple of nights out. You know, like you guys, I'm sure will be the same. Like when you were younger, you came down for the odd night out down in Newcastle, and the weekend away with the lads and stuff like that. So I kind of knew the city and how close it was, and you know that was the team of the '90s with all the the entertainers and stuff. And it was I think back then Newcastle was always kind of anyone from Scotland. It was almost like unless they had any family ties, it was like the favourite English team. I think one because of the entertainers, and two because like the proximity of it because it was so close. So I came down for that job interview at the Chronicle and didn't get it, and I was a writer back then, and I remember thinking, God, it'd be nice to work down here. I think actually, I'm trying to think. I think I was in my first job, which was at the Wishaw Press, which is, as many of you guys know, best known for its snooker player John Higgins, and not actually for anything else. But I was like a writer for the local. It was a weekly paper. And the funny thing about this, the two news reporters for the Wishaw Press back then, look, listen to me, I'm 2 minutes into this podcast, I'm going off on a tangent already, but the two writers for the Wishaw Press, right, for the local weekly paper were myself and John Beaton, the referee from Scotland. So me and him were the two writers, and neither of us did the football, and the football was Marlow with the team that they covered, and we both wrote all like the news stories. So it's weird. And then look what's happened. I'm down obviously now here for Sky Sports covering Newcastle, and I've been for over 12 years. John's now arguably the best or top referee in Scotland, and probably about to hang up his whistle soon, and he's refereed multiple Old Firm games and whatnot. But yeah, I came for the job, didn't get that, and then I always had a bit of a soft spot for the area. I'd been working. I got a job after the newspaper stuff. I got a job at STV. I got a job at Rangers TV, and I worked for Rangers for 3 years as just kind of their kind of match day reporter, like just doing stuff match days, and then I kind of got a bit more, and I was doing the European games, and I worked there for about 3 years, and then it wasn't actually Rangers who employed me. It was Setanta Sports, and Setanta Sports went bust. So I basically lost my job. I was freelance, and I started doing bits and pieces for STV and doing little bits for Sky Sports up in Scotland, just doing maybe like, I don't know, like a Hibs game on a Saturday, or maybe a Motherwell game or whatever, just doing the odd game here and there. but I managed to meet a few different people along the way. And one of the guys I met is a guy called Brian Swanson, who's also Scottish and was the chief football report, or chief sports reporter for Sky Sports at the time. And I met him on a couple of the Rangers trips, and we just clicked. We got on well. We were both from Edinburgh. We had a lot in common. My sister knew his sister, that kind of thing. And I just remember him contacting me in the summer of 2013 and said, would you be up for a move to Newcastle? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I remember where I was. I was actually at Glasgow Airport. I'm heading out on a trip with it was at Rangers or Celtic, I can't remember. I was working for STV at the time. Because after Rangers TV, I got a job at STV for a few years. Managed to have a big part in a lot of big stories, the main one being Rangers going into administration and liquidation in 2012, and I played a big part in breaking that story. And I think when I did that, I was noticed down south. Like the Sky Sports News guys were like, "Who's this guy who's getting the Rangers story?" The reason I was getting it is because I had so many good contacts from my time working there for those 3 years, and many of those people were still there. So anyway, Brian had said to me, "Look, would you be up? Why?" He said, "Well, there's going to be an opening, and they very, very rarely come at Sky Sports News." Back then in 2013, as an opening to be the North East reporter covering Newcastle and Sunderland, and to a lesser extent Middlesbrough, who were in the Championship at the time. And I said, yeah, absolutely, I'd bite your hand off. He goes, well, look, there's going to be a process. I think you should probably apply for it. So I applied for the job, and went down for the interview, went back for a second interview, and there's a lot of people in for it. But I just managed to say the right things and managed to get the job on the day. And look, I think the part that I'd played in that Rangers story, which was, as you guys know, a huge story in Scottish football, I think that played a massive part in it. And it was just, I moved down here, I didn't know anyone. I knew one person through somebody else. I had no friends that lived down here. I just had to start from scratch and build contacts and get to know the football clubs and meet people. And I've now been here, 12 and a half years. I've got family down here, and this is my home now. So it was quite fortuitous the way it happened. It wasn't the plan, but I think back to my early 20s when I came down for that job interview at the Chronicle and didn't get it. I remember thinking, God, it'd be great to live down here. And then fast forward about 10 years, and I did move down, and the rest is history. So it's not been a simple journey, and it's certainly not been simple since I moved here, as you guys well know. But that's kind of what's brought me down here. Not by design. It's just kind of fallen that way, really.
Superb.
Awesome.
All right, Marcus, you want to take us through the first question of the night, mate?
Yeah, hiya Keith, thanks for coming on.
No worries, mate.
Just with you going about contacts and stuff, how we've got a family show, so we've got a lot of young listeners. If you were just starting out on your journey now, what advice would you have for people that are just about to think about going on that journey, and how do you go about building trust with contacts and more kind of trust and credibility?
Yeah, I mean, Marcus, that's a question I get asked quite a lot. I think it's just a general thing in life. Like, people trust you, but you have to earn that trust. It doesn't just happen overnight. I think when I came down here, I remember walking into my first press conference. Alan Pardew was in charge. Newcastle were playing Hull that weekend. And I remember walking in the press room, and there was like 20 other journalists there, and I was like, "Oh, God, these guys are probably like, who's this guy?" And it's probably taken me a while for the other fellow journalists. It probably took me a few years for them to sort of trust or respect me. And again, that takes time. With regard to your contacts at the football clubs, I think with Sky, we've got a bit of a different relationship than maybe some of the newspapers have, in that we've got a commercial partnership with, so the Premier League have a commercial partnership with Sky. So, although we want to get the news stories, and if a manager's about to be sacked, we'll be all over it and we'll be reporting on it. We've kind of got a bit of a duty of care with the football clubs as well, because we're commercial partners. So I think we treat them quite fairly, and I'd like to think they're the same with us, because we're rights holders, and there's an understanding from them that we still have to report on the stories, but we wouldn't maybe go in two-footed on certain things, and we wouldn't kind of belittle them or perhaps laugh at them like maybe some of the national newspapers do in some stages. I think there's a more of a respectful relationship between the two, and that's been something that's always been there. I mean, Sky Sports News has been going for well over 25 years, and that's always been the case. But I think for me individually, I've just kind of, I mean, if I think back to when I moved down here, and you know, if I'm honest with myself, I just wanted to kind of be known for one of the main, if not the main person for getting news regarding Newcastle and Sunderland. And that doesn't happen overnight. I mean, I've been doing this 12 years now, and it probably took half of that for me to kind of be seen amongst those. Like that first few years, I was just desperately trying to get any stories or new signings arriving or anything. You don't just with one story get a reputation. So that's taken a while, and I've kind of done it the hard way. I would say since the takeover went through in 2021, everything's been magnified more and the profile's risen as a result of that. But just trust, you know what, it's just one, not getting things wrong, not taking chances or flyers in anything, just making sure that you treat the clubs with respect. And certainly when I run a story, and I'm sure we'll probably get onto this later, but if I put a story out, I make sure, like, I would just never put something out from an agent, for example. I would always check. I mean, I've got a couple of stories I could be putting out right now that a couple of agents have told me that, you know, if I put out without checking with either Newcastle or Sunderland, could get me in all sorts of trouble. So I would always double source everything. And I think these days a lot of journalists don't do that. So I think there's a mutual respect there between me and the 2 or 3 football clubs that I cover, because I'm in contact, I'm in dialogue with them, you know, constant dialogue with them, and I think they respect that we check things. We don't just send things out and then worry about the consequences later. So it means we miss out on some stories and are second to them or third to them, and perhaps we've got them first, but I think it makes for a better working partnership with the football clubs.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, that's really good to hear.
Keith, you said that your first kind of press conference was against Hull. Pardew was the manager. Was that the infamous headbutt at all, or was that a different game?
No, it's a different one. This one was at St James's Park. Newcastle lost 3-2 on my first game that I covered at St James's Park to Hull. It was an absolute shocker. But no, I think the Pardew headbutt was in the season after. That was down at Hull, wasn't it? Right. I think it was down there. It was either later that season. It was either the return fixture later that season, or it was the following season. But no, it wasn't. It wasn't that one. But I do remember coming into St James's Park for the game that day, and I was like, wow, what's this? And I had been before a couple of times, but I think when you're there in a working capacity, it just seems different. You're sat in the press box right behind the dugout. It's a completely different view. For me, it's the best view from a press box in the whole of the Premier League. It's incredible where you're sat. You can hear what the managers are shouting at each other. You can hear the instructions to the players. You can almost touch them as they come out the tunnel onto the pitch. And I'd been at a couple of Newcastle games. I remember going to Newcastle against Ipswich. This must have been about 2003 or something, 2002, 2003. Newcastle won 3-1 and we couldn't get into the home end, so we were way up in the gods in the away end and the Ipswich end. And I remember Ipswich going 1-0 up at the time. Newcastle ended up winning 3-1. But I remember being away up there going, what a size this place is. And then I came down for a random night out in 2011, two years before I started. Again, I had no idea I was going to get a job. And it was the first game that one of the first games that Cisse and Demba Ba played together, and you were absolutely flying. You were about fourth or fifth in the league. It was the season you got into Europe, and I think Cisse came off the bench and scored. You beat Aston Villa, maybe like 3-1 or something like that. So anyway, these are individual games, but I've just got these memory of these games because I went to them before I started, and then obviously I've now. I've been there 12 and a half years now. The amount of games I would have been at St James's Park, it's ridiculous. But you know, I have to say, just sort of being there and reporting on games, it's one of the best places to do so, if not the best in the Premier League. And I was actually fortunate enough during the week there that my nephew, who's based in Edinburgh, got a late call to be one of the mascots for the Champions League game against Karabag just a couple of days ago. So he came down and he led the teams out alongside holding Kieran Trippier's hand, walking out to lead the team. And I was sat in the press box watching him. He's 9 years old, Joe. And I was watching him come out. I was like, tears streaming down my face. It was the first time I'd ever been in the stadium feeling emotional like that, just seeing him walking out onto the pitch and leading the teams out. So it is an emotional place for me because I've been there so long now and everything that's happened, but I've never been as emotional as I was the other night when my nephew led the teams out in that game.
Oh, awesome.
Super.
Perfect, Keith.
Super.
Thanks. One thing I was going to ask you, if you don't mind, you know how you're saying when you're building up that trust at the start, when you're getting into a club, getting to know everybody, what do you think is the hardest part of the job that the fans don't see?
That's a really good question, that actually. I'm just going to move this over because whenever I move my camera to it, it's blocking one of you. Who asked that? Was that you, Greg? Yeah, right, I was covering.
Keith, yeah.
Sorry, I was covering you there. I'll just, I'm just going to obliterate Marcus again, so I can't see him. Right.
Everyone does that anyway. Don't worry about it.
I can see the other two at the top. No one's getting in front of them. They're just they're fine. So I'm going to have to just move between you two. I'm afraid. Sorry, Greg. What are you asking? You were saying. Say that question.
Yeah,
again,
just what you think is the hardest part of the job that the fans don't see, because obviously when you're building up the confidence and obviously the connections in the club at the start, then obviously going forward, there must be parts of the job that's pretty tough that fans wouldn't see. Obviously, they see you on screen and that's it.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've touched on already is the fact that we've got this unwritten rule that we need to check everything twice. So like I'll see the Sun or the Mail or the Chronicle or any of the newspapers whack out a story, and I'm like, I know they've just got that off the agent. And then now you've got all these online guys. You've got the Fabrizio Romanos of the world, and you've got all these guys who are making a living off of. I mean, look, Fabrizio Romano now gets his own stories, but he started off just taking other people's stories and writing, here we go on it, right? Yeah. And then because obviously only a few people were following the person who the story originated from, and he had so many, and he amassed so many quickly, he was able to just pass it off as his own. But he's now got to a stage, and full credit to him, he's getting to a stage now where stories are actually coming to him because he's such a big name and people want to be connected with him. So I find it frustrating that there's a lot of, and I'm not saying he's an ITK, but there's a lot of ITKs out there now who they'll see it written somewhere and then they'll just write it again without checking it, like with it verbatim. So like they're almost in some ways suggesting to some of the readers or the viewers, the consumers, that they know it's happening, even though they've got absolutely zero knowledge of it. They're just passing it off because someone else has written it. And if it ends up being wrong, then they'll just say, oh, it wasn't me, I just saw it from somewhere else. For me, and for Sky, we don't do that. Like, I would never write anything unless I've got two sources of my own, and I do find it incredibly frustrating when, for big story breaks, particularly a big transfer, and I've maybe heard it from the agent, right? But I've not been able to stand it up from someone high up within Newcastle or Sunderland or whoever the club it is that I involve. And sometimes I've had that story first, and I find it incredibly frustrating when you're like, I had that story, but because we've got this rule that we need to make sure we need to clear it with the clubs, or we need to let the clubs know that we're going to run it. I've got to a stage now with the clubs where sometimes if you don't hear back, or the person, your contact's busy or whatever, I've now got a thing where if I get a story, I'll put like a half-hour deadline on it, and I'll say, look, I'm going to run this at 6 p.m. unless you tell me it's absolute rubbish. So that's kind of the level I've kind of got to them with them. But it's these days, half an hour, 20 minutes, 15 minutes is a long time in news, and particularly sports news. I mean, back when I used to work for STV, you could hold on to a story until 6 o'clock that night. Like I used to work with a guy, Raman Bardo, I used to in Glasgow, who's taught me a lot of what I know. And Ram and I would sit there all day. We're like, do you think this will hold to 6 o'clock, or do you think it'll come out on Twitter? And you could sit on things. Sometimes even the newspapers could hold things until the next morning. But just with the explosion of social media and everyone's like absolute thirst for any kind of stories, things aren't getting held for any amount of time now. So you kind of need to just get it out when you hear it. But like sometimes you can sit on something for half an hour or an hour or whatever, and you miss it, and someone else gets the exclusive, and you're like, I knew that, I had that. And it's happened to me on countless occasions, and I find it very, very frustrating. The other thing I find really frustrating is continually getting criticism on social media. Like I've had a lot, as you guys will be aware, over the last few years from Sunderland fans who were criticising, well, basically just saying I'm a Newcastle fan, and criticising the fact I don't cover them when they don't know the bigger story to it. And every time I tried to explain it wasn't good enough, they would just come out with some other reason for hating me and not liking the situation. And what I found quite interesting over the last few weeks is I feel like the Sunderland fans have kind of warmed to me a bit because they've had quite a good season, and I've been reporting on that. I also reported on all their signings last summer. You know, they signed 14 players at a cost of £160 million. We broke a number of those. We got exclusive shots of a lot of them arriving, and I think some of the Sunderland fans are now thinking, "Oh, actually, he's all right." But it's just because I'm telling them stuff that they want to hear, right? It's a bit like the Newcastle fans pre-takeover. I would suggest the Newcastle fans didn't really like me that much because I was always reporting negative stuff. But as soon as I started reporting positive stuff, it's like, oh, he's great, he's telling us what we want to hear, and it comes down, it's as simple as that. What I thought was quite interesting was in the last few weeks, I've noticed I've started getting a bit of abuse from the Middlesbrough fans, right, on social media, because yeah, they're like, hang on, we're top of the championship, we're flying, we've just won 6 games in a row, why are you talking about Newcastle and Sunderland all the time? And I'm like, oh God, I just can't win here. It'll be the Hull fans next.
You just trying to win, Keith. You just trying to win. And it's funny you actually mentioned the likes of Romano there. So I think NUSS fell out of love with him during the summer when he peddled a particular Swedish agent's stories to get a move and try and manipulate things a certain way.
Can I just add, Taylor? Sorry, can I just add? I don't have any issue. Like, I actually respect what he's done. I respect how well he's grown his product, right? And like, I mean, I think he used to be involved at Sky Sports over in Italy, and he's seen a gap in the market to be this transfer guru and transfer expert. But this notion that he sits on his phone churning out a story every 30 seconds all day is absolutely rubbish. Like, he's now got a staff working for him, right? Who are now scouring the internet for stories, and sometimes passing them off as their own. But then sometimes he's got to a stage now where he's now so well recognised and respected that the stories are coming to him. Like, not just agents. I think football clubs want to be in bed with him. Players all want to be in bed with him and show that they've got that connection. And that's fair play to him. So I'm not criticising for that. What I would criticise for is how he got there in the first place. And it was latching onto other respected journalist stories because he saw a gap in the market there. And look, there's a big part of me that's like, fair play to him. But you're right. A lot of his stuff does come from agents. But then a lot of other journalist stuff, a lot of my stuff comes from agents. But my issue is, I would get it from an agent, but I still wouldn't run it until I've ran it past the. I mean, I've been given a story in the last 24 hours about a potential transfer in the summer, and I can't put this out until I've had like the thumbs up, not the thumbs up that it's true, but the thumbs up that they're okay about that sort of getting out there, or there's not going to be an issue. I've not had that yet, so I'm sitting here thinking I could see this story tonight or tomorrow morning or 5 hours ago, and there's that frustration, and it's difficult to rest sometimes, particularly when the transfer window's open. I'm a bit more chilled now, but certainly last summer with all the Isak stuff, it was relentless, and not just Isak, but all the different strands to that story. You know, Newcastle going for Sesko, Newcastle going for Ekitike, Newcastle going for Wissa and eventually getting trying for Strand Larsen. All the strands to that story was just incredible. It was just it basically ran my entire life for the whole summer. Like, I was just a slave to that story. And I couldn't. I mean, if you speak to my partner, and she's like, it was like you weren't even there at times. I was just like zoned out because things were happening every single day, and I wasn't able to relax. I can relax a bit more when the window's closed, but as I've just said to you, there's a story there that I found out 24 hours ago, and that's a good story actually. And you know, if Fabrizio Romano had been told that, it'd be out there by now. You know, and that's the thing. I feel we're under stricter rules, and it can be quite punishing at times.
Yep. Thanks, Keith. Could you tell us what the funniest or strangest moment you've ever had on the job is?
Do you know what? I was looking through the questions earlier, because I know you sent me a couple of them what you were going to be asking, and this was the one that sort of this is the one that kind of stuck out. And I was like, oh, I don't know, should I tell this story? But I'll tell this story. So look, there's been a number of things. You know what it's like. I'm sure you guys are the same in your day jobs. You forget more than you remember. Like, it's every day you roll on to a new story and a new thing. But the thing that popped into my mind was it's not the funniest, but it was quite amusing at the time. It was during lockdown, and you remember when the games were all behind closed doors? We were still reporting on the games, but we were actually reporting on the games from home. So it was the game Newcastle played Brighton down there. Steve Bruce was in charge, and I think Brighton won maybe 3-0 or something. It was an absolute hammering. It was one of the games like not long before the takeover went through, and it was my birthday, and we had like a gathering at the house, and we were there and we're having drinks and stuff like that, and we're watching the game. All my mates were around. They were Newcastle fans, and I had to go and do the post-match interviews, like with the managers afterwards. So like everyone was in the house, and I was like, guys, everyone needs to be quiet. I need to go and do the post-match interviews. Like we're having a few drinks, watching the game. I remember going through to the kitchen to do it, and I could just hear everyone just still like enjoying it next door, or not enjoying it. They were all annoyed that Newcastle had lost, and I was like, God, Steve Bruce is under pressure here. I'm gonna have to go through here and ask him about his job. I'm gonna have to go in and ask it, and then, because obviously you've had a few drinks and stuff, you've got a bit more confidence about you. So like I was just first up in the press box, goes, I'll ask the first one, and we're on Zoom like this, and Steve's like, all right, Keith. I'm just like, all right, and then I was like, look, obviously I need to ask you the question about this, and then of course the boys are like in the other room listening to it happening, and they're like Newcastle fans, and it was just a really strange situation to be in, like to be at home, not at the game. You know, the manager's under pressure, the Newcastle fans are unhappy, and you're kind of like trying to celebrate your birthday in the middle of it all. It was a very, very strange situation. And then like Steve and I, you know, I actually had a lot of respect for him when we worked together. We had a really good relationship actually. But then it didn't end well around about the takeover. It all just got a bit messy because I was obviously outside the training ground every day for a week. Remember when the takeover went through, it was the international break, so there wasn't really any other news. So we were just, Sky Sports News, we were just all over it. Like they could see like the fans that gathered the night the takeover went through. And like my bosses and producers were like, we knew this is a big, like massive story, and everyone was interested. Newcastle were like talking about being #1 club in the world and all this kind of thing. So I was outside every day. There was a different element to the story, and of course, once the takeover happened, the noises that I was hearing from my contacts were that Steve Bruce was going to lose his job and a new manager was going to come in. So we were outside the training ground every hour, every day for a week in the build up to that game against Tottenham, saying I was on there saying, look, my understanding is Steve Bruce is not going to be in the dugout for the game against Tottenham, and it made it even more confusing in the fact that it was Steve Bruce's 1,000th game in charge as a manager against Tottenham. So it was just a horrible situation for him. But a decision was made along the line somewhere that he was gonna remain in the role. So I remember outside the training ground, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, every hour, Steve Bruce is going to go, Steve Bruce is going to go. I was doing it as respectfully as I could, but I was just reporting what I was being told from contacts within the new hierarchy at the club who'd taken over. And not in my wildest dreams did I think it would come to the Friday and Steve Bruce would still be in situ and I'd have to go in and speak to him. So press conferences then were on Zoom still, right? But because we had the game live on Sky on the Sunday, I actually got a one-to-one with Steve Bruce on the Friday, the day of the game. So I'd been out all week and I was like, God, this is so awkward because I know Sky Sports News is on all the big screens within the training ground. He just needed to look over his shoulder, turn around, and he would see me every hour talking about his future. So it gets to the Friday. I had the one-to-one with him after training. We set up inside the indoor hall in the training ground, and I see Steve walking towards me, and I told the story a couple of times. And he's walking over towards me, and I thought, you know what, before he goes into the press room, which was past me, to do the press conference, the sort of digital press conference, I'm just going to go and just say hi to him and shake his hand. And I was just like, hi, Steve. And he's like, what do you want, or something like that. I said, I just want to apologise. I just want to apologise for being outside every hour talking about this, but as you can imagine, it's the only story in town, and our guys are desperate to have it. And he went, do you know what, Keith, you can go and F yourself, right? And if you think I'm doing that interview, that sit-down interview, Sky going to go and F themselves as well. And he got right up in my face, and I was like, oh God, I actually quite had a bit of respect for him, the fact that he was like saying what he felt and not just, because I think with some managers that are annoyed with you, they would never pull you up for it. They just kind of maybe say things behind the scenes, and I was like, oh God, and I could feel myself. I was like, God, that was like quite a scary moment. He's saying, not past me. He's like, I'm not doing that interview, and I'm not doing it, and you can go and do it. And I was like, look, Steve, it's not my fault. Like, I'm getting asked to do. He goes, I don't care whose fault it is, and he stormed into the press room to do opens up the laptop Like, and then of course I asked the first questions at the press conference. So the press conference goes, right, we're going to start the press conference. And he opens up the laptop, and I was like, "Hi, Steve," from the room next door. And I'm like, he's like, "Oh, it's not you again." And he was like, he was really cut. He was really cut with his answers. He was like really short, like one word answers. And then the next guy, whoever the reporter was, came up second, and they're like, "Oh, Steve, what about your team news?" And then he gave them chapter and verse. So he was just really, he was annoyed at me, and he was kind of taking it out on me. And like, I've spoken to him a couple of times since and stuff, but it just showed the pressure that everyone was under. So it was just a really awkward situation that I'm sat there or supposed to be. He never did the interview with us. I was supposed to be doing this one-to-one interview about him, and I think just for him, he was embarrassed that everyone was talking about his future when it should have been such a big event for him. But it was just the timing of it, and you know, he obviously wanted to hang in there and dig his heels in and make sure he got his payoff and stuff. And look, it was a payoff that he had been agreed by the hierarchy, so by Mike Ashley, so he was due that. But it was a really awkward situation for me. I remember coming out and saying to my boss, I went, "Guys, Steve Bruce was just squared up to me in the training ground. Why is this squared up to you, Keith?" I went, "Because we are outside doing lives on the hour, every hour of this future, and have been doing it all week." Like, "All right." I said, how are you?" I went, "I'm all right." It was quite intimidating. He was right up in my face, like almost head to head to me. Like, "All right, you free to do a live again in 5 minutes?" It did not stop them at all asking me to do any more.
Superb. Lad, Keith, I think that's probably the perfect point to take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsors.
This episode is proudly supported by TMA Accountants, based across Dundee and Fife. TMA specialise in helping businesses, the self-employed, and individuals stay on top of their accounts, tax affairs, and long-term tax planning. With offices in Broughty Ferry and Anstruther, their team covers everything from bookkeeping and payroll to tax advice and business support, freeing up your time so you can focus on what actually moves your business forward. So whether you're running a growing company or juggling self-employed life, TMA Accountants are here to help you stay organized, compliant, and confident. We're delighted to have them backing the podcast and supporting the wider community.
Fleming & Gibson Plumbing and Heating are your trusted experts for plumbing, heating, electrical, and renewable energy solutions. From emergency repairs to full boiler installations, their accredited team delivers quality workmanship that you can rely on. They offer complete bathroom design and installation from their dedicated showroom, for a reliable service, modern renewables, and work done right first time. Choose Fleming & Gibson, accredited, compliant, and trusted.
And welcome, like Mags. Massive thanks to our sponsors. And Keith, if you need your accounts done, please do reach out to TMA. And also, if you need your plumbing and heating done, then give Fleming & Gibson a shout. But during the break there, Keith, I think perfectly timed. Did Royal Mail just arrive at your house there?
Yeah, they have, yeah. Just got this badge. You see it?
That's you officially an NUSS member with your pin badge. Superb. We're looking for that on the TV, a big screen.
I'll put that on tomorrow when I'm at the press conference, see if anyone notices.
Quality. Give her a wee selfie. It'll be class. Keith, what we're going to do now is have a super quick fire round, and we're going to start firing through some questions. So, Marcus, are you going to hit us up first?